Spring 1945. The roads of Germany groaned under the weight of defeat. Abandoned half-tracks, trucks, and tanks lay scattered like fallen giants, machines that once thundered across Europe, now silent, lifeless, hollow. Among them rested one of the Wehrmacht's proudest creations, the Sd.Kfz 7. It wasn't destroyed by bombs, nor pierced by shells. It died of something far more ordinary and far more fatal. It died of thirst. In the early 1930s, as the world limped out of the Great Depression, Germany's factories began to hum again. But beneath the sound of industry was the pulse of something darker, the quiet preparation for another war. In secret halls and drafty workshops, engineers of the Heereswaffenamt, the German Army Weapons Office, began designing what they called Sonderkraftfahrzeuge, special-purpose vehicles. Each one was a piece of a grand puzzle, part of Hitler's vision for a lightning-fast army, the Blitzkrieg. Among those designs was one that would become the backbone of Germany's mechanized power, the Sd.Kfz 7. It wasn't just another truck. It was conceived as a mechanical warhorse, capable of hauling the most feared artillery piece of the modern age, the 8.8-centimeter Flock 36. That gun, destined to earn the nickname the 88, could pierce the armor of any tank the Allies fielded. But it needed a partner, a beast strong enough to drag it through mud, sand, and snow. And so German engineers began to sculpt one of the most elegant, complex, and expensive half-tracks ever built. They called upon three industrial titans, Krauss-Maffei in Munich, Hansa Lloyd in Bremen, and Borgward in Hanover. Each contributed something unique: precision chassis design, reinforced towing frames, and a suspension system that bordered on artistry. Beneath its armored hood sat a Maybach HL62 TUK engine, a six-cylinder, 140-horsepower symphony of moving metal. It was the same brand of engine that powered many of Germany's tanks, the Panzer III and later the Tiger's ancestors. Smooth, refined, but demanding. Like a thoroughbred racehorse, it could perform miracles, if you fed it properly. The half-track's running gear was a marvel of engineering logic and madness. Each side carried interleaved road wheels, 16 of them overlapping like the teeth of a clock. The design spread weight evenly, giving the Sd.Kfz 7 remarkable traction and stability. On soft terrain, it floated where trucks bogged down, but maintaining it, that was another story. Mud, ice, and frozen dirt jammed the wheels. Changing a single tire required dismantling half the suspension. It was efficient on paper, but in the field, it tested patience more than steel. Still, to the German army, this wasn't a problem. It was perfection. The Wehrmacht's doctrine valued precision, coordination, and speed. They believed that a few superior machines, used expertly, could defeat many inferior ones. And for a while, they were right. In the campaigns of 1939 and 1940, Sd.Kfz 7s were everywhere, towing flak guns across Poland's plains, hauling howitzers through the fields of France, and carrying artillery crews like knights upon steel steeds. Their engines purred, their treads chewed through the earth, and their presence became synonymous with the unstoppable momentum of Blitzkrieg. But every masterpiece hides a flaw. The Sd.Kfz 7 was fast, but it was thirsty. It was powerful, but it was fragile. It was brilliant, but it was too German. Its design embodied the soul of the Reich itself, ambitious, elegant, and utterly unsustainable. And as the war dragged on, that very perfection would turn against it. The Maybach engine that once roared with confidence would begin to cough, choke, and starve. because the one thing it needed, the one thing every half-track, every tank, every plane demanded, was slipping away. While German engineers obsessed over precision, across the Atlantic, a different philosophy was taking shape, one that would quietly, relentlessly grind their perfection into dust. The American counterpart, the machine that just kept going. While the Germans chased perfection, the Americans chased production. Across the Atlantic, in the roaring industrial heartlands of Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago, another kind of war horse was taking shape, one that didn't need polish or prestige, only purpose. Its name was the M3 Halftrack. To look at it, you'd hardly call it beautiful. Its shape was clumsy, its armor thin, its profile tall and boxy, like a cross between a farm truck and a tin can. But beneath that crude skin lay a genius, born not of precision, but of practicality. The M3 was powered by the white 160AX gasoline engine, producing about 147 horsepower, roughly the same as the Sd.Kfz-7's Maybach HL62. Yet it was how that power was used that made all the difference. The American engine ran cool, forgiving, and simple. It could tolerate low-quality fuel, extreme heat, and months of abuse. If it broke, a soldier could fix it with a wrench, a rag, and a little luck. There was no mystique, no obsession with tolerances measured to the thousandth of a millimeter. The Americans didn't design their half-track to be a mechanical symphony. They designed it to be a hammer, something you could drop in the dirt, pick up, and swing again. And in war, that simplicity was genius. The U.S. Army knew that the greatest enemy of a machine wasn't the opposing gun, it was the mud, the dust, and the lack of spare parts. In North Africa, they carried infantry. In Italy, they hauled mortars and machine guns. In France, they became mobile command posts, medical transports, even makeshift ambulances. The M3 wasn't built to impress engineers, it was built to win wars. American logistics were relentless. For every Sd.Kfz-7 that rolled off a German line, 5 M3s left American factories. And that, right there, was the quiet, crushing truth of the conflict. The Germans built a masterpiece. The Americans built an army. The M3 didn't glide, it rattled. It didn't purr, it growled. But when the time came to move, it moved, across deserts, forests, mountains, and fields soaked in rain. And while the Sd.Kfz-7 was tuned like a violin, pure, fragile, temperamental, the M3 was a harmonica, rough, loud, but it always played the tune. By 1944, American convoys stretched from Normandy's beaches to the borders of Germany. Each M3 half-track carried the rhythm of inevitability, the steady beat of a war machine that refused to stop. And as those endless lines of American vehicles pushed forward, German soldiers began to see the contrast. While their own half-tracks coughed and sputtered, the American ones just kept going. They were not elegant, but they were unstoppable. Every army marches on its stomach, but in the 20th century, it marched on fuel. The Wehrmacht's mighty Sd.Kfz-7 was designed in an age when Germany dreamed of fast wars, wars won before the tanks ran dry. In theory, its 215-liter fuel tank could push it more than 150 kilometers. In practice, through mud, snow, and shattered terrain, that number often fell below 90. The Maybach HL62 engine was a marvel, smooth, responsive, and powerful. But it was also greedy. It burned fuel at an alarming rate, especially when towing an 8.8-centimeter flak gun or a full artillery load. Every time the driver pressed the accelerator, the half-track gulped gasoline like a drowning man gasping for air. The Wehrmacht supply trucks, already strained by Allied bombing, could not keep up. By 1943, Germany's petroleum lifelines were unraveling. Romania's Ploiești oil fields were burning under American bombs. Synthetic fuel plants could not match the Army's hunger, and the Sd.Kfz, built for speed and power, began to slow. A machine is only as strong as what it feeds it, and in a world where gasoline became rarer than gold, the Sd.Kfz was starving. Across the lines, the American M3 half-track, running on abundant supplies from Texas and Pennsylvania, kept moving. The contrast was cruel. The Americans had more fuel than they could burn. The Germans had more machines than they could move. It was not the shell or the shrapnel that killed these machines. It was the invisible enemy in every war: logistics. To the German engineer, precision was sacred. Every part had to fit perfectly, every bolt torqued to exact standards. The Sd.Kfz was no exception. Its interleaved suspension, 16 overlapping wheels per side, gave it an almost supernatural grip. Its carburetor was tuned to perfection. Its power transmission ran smooth as silk. But in the field, that perfection became a curse. When ice built up between the interleaved wheels, they locked solid. To remove one, mechanics often had to dismantle half the undercarriage. When dust entered the carburetor, the engine misfired. When the wrong grade of oil was used, as it often was in the final years, bearings seized, pistons cracked, and entire engines failed. The Sd.Kfz was a masterpiece that demanded a laboratory in the middle of chaos. The American M3 half-track, by contrast, was brutal in its simplicity. Its leaf spring suspension could be fixed with a hammer. Its engine could run on low-octane fuel without complaint. Its design was not refined. It was resilient. German doctrine worshipped the perfect machine. American doctrine worshipped the reliable one. And that difference between precision and pragmatism determined who could keep fighting when everything began to fall apart. In the spring of 1945, as Allied forces flooded into Germany, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department began testing the captured relics of the Third Reich. Among them, an Sd.Kfz found near Kassel, fully intact, almost untouched by battle. They fueled it, towed a standard artillery load, and ran it side by side with their own M3 half-track over a 65-mile course. The numbers spoke louder than propaganda. The American vehicle consumed roughly 60 liters. The German one, more than 110. Despite its power, the Sd.Kfz lagged behind, overheated sooner, and required more maintenance stops. Its complex transmission, once a symbol of superiority, struggled under continuous use. The verdict from American evaluators was blunt: a technically advanced machine, but operationally impractical for sustained campaigns. That phrase became the epitaph of German engineering in World War II. They built machines to win battles. The Allies built machines to win the war. By the final months of the war, Germany's roads were lined with the corpses of its own brilliance. Sd.Kfz, Tigers, Panthers, all stranded, engines dry, tracks sunken into the mud. They hadn't been destroyed by enemy fire. They had simply run out of breath. Fuel shortages crippled entire divisions. Tanks were towed by horses. Artillery pieces were abandoned in ditches, and once proud mechanized regiments devolved into foot soldiers trudging through ruin. In the end, the machine that symbolized the might of the Wehrmacht, the Sd.Kfz-7, became the perfect metaphor for Germany itself. Magnificent in design, devastating in the short run, but doomed by its own excess. The true tragedy wasn't that these machines failed. It was that they could never have succeeded, not in a war where fuel, steel, and time were measured against the full industrial weight of the United States. Today, a handful of Sd.Kfz-7s remain. They sit silent in museums, polished, perfect, and motionless. Visitors admire their beauty, their precision, their presence. Few realize the irony. These machines, designed to be unstoppable, were undone not by design flaws, but by the philosophy that created them. The Germans built for perfection, the Americans built for persistence. And in the end, persistence always wins. The Sd.Kfz-7 stands not as a failure of engineering, but as a warning. A reminder that complexity without sustainability is fragility wearing armor. If you listen closely in those museums, you might still hear it, the faint heartbeat of an engine that once roared across Europe. It was strong, it was proud, it was perfect, but it was never built to last. In its silence lies the eternal truth of war. Power fades. Endurance endures.